Ethics, all heard about ethics. When I say the word ethics, give me just one or two words that come to mind, or a phrase that comes to mind when you think of ethics. Ethics and?
Behavior.
Behavior, definitely. Has something to do with how you behave, absolutely. What else comes to mind when you hear the word ethics?
Code of conduct.
Code of conduct, absolutely. By the way, where's the other microphone? Oh, you have, okay, I just want to make sure we're safe, that's all.
Discipline.
Discipline, absolutely. These are excellent associations. Anyone else? These are all good. These are all fitting.
Living an upright life.
Living an upright life. Absolutely. All of these here. The question is, and it's a big question with no single or simple answer, from what source does a person draw their ethics? And you may say correctly, well, you get a lot of ethics from the Bible. Absolutely yes. Absolutely yes. Although it's interesting, Jesus talked about the golden rule. Don't know what the golden rule is, right? Do unto others as you want them to do unto you. You can put it negatively, it's still a good rule. Don't do unto others what you don't want them doing to you. They both work together well, okay? Where did he get all of his ethics from? Definitely the Bible. In the Old Testament especially, when you have 613 laws, as the rabbis used to count it, 613 laws, we're definitely talking about many ideas of how to behave or not behave. Do remember, however, some of the laws that are in the Old Testament are very particular to the nation of Israel. Some of them have an easily broad application. We start, of course, with the Ten Commandments. Those are broad cross-cultural principles. Okay? Some of the laws, at least, are very particular to Jewish ritual purity. All right? If I were to ask you, does anyone here observe Jewish ritual laws of cleanliness? Most of us will say, not me. I don't. Okay? It doesn't mean I'm disregarding God's law, but I'm saying there are places where the law is particular to a particular set of people. Some of them. Not all, some of them. Furthermore, on the other side of that coin, I can say there are questions and issues that we are raising today, many of which have come out this week, where we can say these weren't questions of the ancient society. A very obvious one is a technological difference. They didn't have to sort through what is a healthy or unhealthy view of a cell phone, for obvious reasons. That wasn't an issue. So back to my question, when you're thinking about where you gain your ethics from, okay, where do ethics come from? We'll say, absolutely, we want a biblical ethic, but we want to do it cautiously and thoughtfully, so that we're looking at the universal side of biblical ethics, like another one, honor your father and mother. Which, by the way, may look a little bit different in different societies, exactly on how do you honor your father and mother. So we'll say the Bible, but here are some other sort of ideas in terms of ethics, okay? You can get ethics from what we might call sort of a general human experience, okay? This is very similar to what you see in the wisdom literature, as we were noting this week. A lot of the guidelines and sensible ways of how to live or not to live, how to behave or not to behave, how to be disciplined or not, okay, are things that sort of, if you will say, they come from a degree of common sense, All right? Doesn't mean everybody's necessarily going to agree, but you can see even across societies that try not to be Jewish or Christian, often still have some degree of the same sense of these are good or bad ways to live. All right? I'll just throw a few other sort of terms out. I don't want to spend too much time with this, but of the groundwork. I want to get more specifically, okay? But we sometimes talk about what we call deontological ethics, okay? Sort of a sense of the divine in some level, where ideals above us apply here. Not everybody buys these. Okay? Not everybody buys these. I'm saying some do. So, deontological ethics. Okay? We might talk as well, I think there's a couple different terms I could use here, but I would say probably ethics that deal with the, if you will, I'm going to say under pressure. Okay? Ethics where you have to make a particular hard decision based on the circumstances in which you find yourself. Let me give a specific example. You are a medical doctor and you're serving in a war zone, and there's fighting going on, there's horrible things happening, and two badly injured people come in, and the question is, do I treat this person first or this person first? Okay? It's what's called a triage situation. And the ethics that are particular to that situation are ones that may only apply in that particular situation. Under pressure, under extreme difficulty, you may sometimes choose sort of a one that says, if I have a chance to rescue this person's life, and maybe I'm pretty sure I cannot help this person very well, I'll frankly might ignore the one so I can do the best to save the person's life. Anyway, I'm just giving you some ideas. Ultimately, this is not a philosophy class. I do teach an ethics class, but I don't want to get into the philosophy. I just want to give you a sense of the fact that there are some choices about how a person develops their ethical system. Okay? And what I want to suggest is that ethics tend to be the opposite or versus being pragmatic. Okay? Pragmatic means I can do something because it works. This is tricky. Sometimes I do something because it works and it's good. Sometimes I do something that works, but it's bad. I'm pragmatic. I'll give you some specific examples. Okay? I know of people who, this is coming back to something we did a little while ago, I know of people who have gone into ministry because they knew that if they were in the gospel ministry, it would give them access to people's homes, to people's children, and to people's property. And knowing this is a pragmatic approach to it. If I go into ministry, I may be able to do bad things on all these levels. There are people who are motivated that way. They like something because it possibly will get them something, whether that's right or wrong. Okay? Now, in many ways, this is the good news. I think if you take Jesus' word for this, in many ways, right, especially with the golden rule, there's something sensible about ethics, right? And one of the ways to test them out is to say to yourself, if I talk to you in a certain way, do I want you to talk to me in that way? Hopefully the answer is yes, right? If I'm working on a project with you in a certain way, do I want you working that way back with me? Hopefully the answer is yes, right? If we're going to go into some kind of a venture together, some kind of a project, all right, and I'm saying, hey, I want you to be involved, am I willing to be involved in the same way I expect you to be involved? And hopefully the answer is yes, but that's the question that sort of lingers here. A lot of ethics and ethical behavior is actually relatively easy to see, relatively, most of the time. right? I like to say sometimes with regard to pastoral counseling, I never get someone coming to me and saying, shall I do this good behavior or shall I be involved in bad behavior? People don't say it that way, and I don't think that way. Rather, they're sorting through harder shades of gray. That's usually where most counseling takes place. Can I be very specific? I had an interesting question from some of my students a few years ago. They were 22, they were graduating, they were getting married, okay? And they were going to drive. Pennsylvania is, we're not quite on the East Coast, but we're towards the East Coast over here, all right? We're in the western end of West Pennsylvania. And you have to drive about 2,500 miles to get over to the west coast of the United States. It's a long drive and a long flight, okay? And this couple wanted to have a honeymoon out on the west coast, all right? And which is a beautiful way to go. And they wanted to make a drive, and they did make a drive. And they posed an interesting question to me. They said, you know, as we go out there, we're going to be driving through Colorado. And at the time they were just married, Colorado had, the state of Colorado had just changed its laws, and you were allowed now to smoke marijuana there. Anyone who wanted to smoke marijuana in Colorado at that time could do so, and there were no legal, you know, no penalties. It was very easy. By the way, it's the same to this day. Okay. But by the way, whenever I want to smoke weed, and I don't ever want to, but if I want to, I simply go to conferences out in Colorado, and anytime I'm in a room, there's somebody smoking weed, and the residual weed. Oh God, I don't want to be around that. But anyway, they said to me, if we're going through Colorado, and we've never tried marijuana, what do you think about us trying marijuana while we're in the state of Colorado? No one's ever asked me that question before, right? Because at least while they were in the state, that state, it was legal, right? So my answer was not going to be based on law, right? Law response says, look, if you do this, it's quite possible you will get arrested or fined or both. Plus, I'm not sure you get any benefit from it. Maybe you do, but maybe some people use it for pain. I know that, fair enough, but I'm just saying, for most of us, there's no benefit to be had. Look at my age. I'm the hippie generation. My generation experimented with drugs extensively. That's in the back of my mind. This is the new generation. Anyway, I want to tell you what my thought. By the way, whatever opinion you have is your opinion. I said this to the young man, the young woman. I said, you know what? I said, if you do that, you know, you go to Colorado, you smoke weed while you're in Colorado. I said, you have not done the worst sin you could do. Okay, probably you're going to be fine out of it. But I said the question you want to ask yourself is, will you really benefit from that? I know you're curious. What's it like to smoke marijuana? I get that. Lots of people are curious, right, about all sorts of things in life. And I said, it's not so much a question of is it right or wrong, and I'll let you do it. But I said, why don't you too? You see, I didn't want this responsibility on me. I wanted them to own. You see, this is a key part about ethics. Owning responsibility for yourself, as well as thinking about how to help others own it for themselves. This brings in a related issue. I'm going to keep on being on this with you, is problem ownership. We mentioned it earlier. I'm going to put it up again. Because sometimes people want a pastor to make a ruling, make a law, you see, because that takes the responsibility off their shoulders. We can do such and such because Pastor so-and-so said it's okay. Or we refuse to do such and such because Pastor so-and-so said don't do it. But in every case, they're pointing to the pastor as the new judge of their life. That's not a healthy position to be in. It's not. Not for you, not for me, or anybody else. Anyway, back to what I said. I said to them, you own the choice. This is your honeymoon. You can decide how you remember the event. And if you think it helps you, I'm not going to step it up. I would say question whether it will really help you. All right? And by the way, they went out, they took a trip, came back. I said, what did you decide? And they said, we decided it wasn't worth it, so we didn't do it. Good. I think you'll do well. And life goes on. So, so ethics brings in, let me just write this down so it's before us, I know I'm going down low here, but the issue of problem ownership, I think, is a big one. And it ties in with something we were saying earlier today, that for not a few people, someone who is an authority figure is given more responsibility or left to carry a bigger ethical burden than they really should be given. Flip side, sometimes people in authority, and a pastor is an authority position, try to take on more responsibility than perhaps they really should be taking on. All right, so, and it's something I didn't think about. Good news about myself as a young pastor, as I said, I was a fairly young man when I first went into ministry. The good news is I took it very seriously. I wanted to do the right thing. I hope you do too. I'm sure you do. I'm sure you do. But that also, unfortunately, sometimes led me to say, well, I'm responsible or solely responsible for the happiness and the well-being of my congregation. Well, I'm responsible for some of the happiness and well-being of my congregation. That was in the forefront of my mind, because the first church I ever pastored, the previous pastor was sort of widely known as just a very, very unhappy man. He'd been there for many, many years. He'd done some good things, but in the latter years that he was there, he let people know he was an angry, unhappy man. Ultimately, the reasons don't matter. That's his life, and I'm not here to run his life. But he was known for being unhappy, and he let people know it. He would distribute his unhappiness to other people. And I thought, I don't want to do that. Good. I don't want to do it. But then, unfortunately, I said, well, if the church does well, this is on my shoulders, right? Well, some of the things in the church were on my shoulders, yes. But unfortunately, I discovered pretty quickly there were a few people in that congregation who, when they didn't like whatever was developing, and by the way, what was developing were, we had new people coming into our church, and those new people were taking up positions of responsibility and leadership, and the older leadership was very angry about that. So they blamed me. Imagine being blamed because you were bringing people into the church. Have you had that problem before? Yeah, okay, it happens, because some people want to maintain just a consistency, and churches are organisms, they're like human beings. That they change, they grow, they enlarge, they shrink. Living organisms have a dynamic of always changing and developing in some way. And some people don't want that. They want a sort of rigid consistency, all right? And so I was trying to keep people happy, and I was realizing at some point, this isn't working. And one of the senior pastors, one of the wonderful men who was just influential on my life in many, many ways, this was one of his major themes. He said, listen, figure out who owns what problem. Sample. Let's say I come to you and I say, sister, I am very unhappy with you. I'm really upset with you. I lay out some problem, okay? She's got to figure out something, all right? She's got to figure out, first off, is this my problem that I'm dumping on her? Now, she also has to consider, maybe she made a mistake, and I'm just kind of like, putting it out. But she's got to sort through, is this really her problem? Possibly. Maybe a piece of it's her problem. Maybe none of it is her problem. And she has to find a way to say back to me, Jonathan Watt, this is your problem, and you've got to deal with something that you see as a problem. And that's problem ownership. I have found this happen again and again and again. This is one of these recycling issues that comes about, is the ease with which human beings blame others, okay, for their own unhappiness. All right? It happens in families, it happens in churches. By the way, it happens in entire societies. All right? I'm going to be very, very careful not to get political on you. But by the way, Regina and I happen to share together a rather dim view of American politics these days. We're saddened by much of what's going on in American politics these days. And there are certain blames that we keep on hearing, and one of the blames is that all of America's problems are immigrants coming to America. Well, I'm an immigrant who came to America, so I'm questioning whether that's real. Have I caused that many problems for Americans? I don't think so. I don't think so, right? So there's blame on a national level. Sometimes the blame is right. Sometimes it's blown out of proportion. It's an issue of problem ownership on a national level. Churches blame leaders. This is why pastors must work with a committee. They must. I don't care whether you want to call your committee elders, deacons, the council, I don't care, all right? But you've got to be working not as a solo individual, all right? You need advisors, you need supporters, and they are to help you sort through, okay, if we have caused a problem, yes, it is our problem, and we've got to figure our way through it. And we all make mistakes, and we all do things we regret, and sometimes we need to own them ourselves. But we also need to be able to say, someone is expecting magic from us, and we're not magicians, we're human beings. We're blessed by God's Spirit. God's using us to do good things. Thank God He is. We're co-workers with Christ. I love that phrase, co-workers with the divine person Himself. That gives us a lot of respect and a degree of authority and power. Degree, but not total. All right? And any entity, whether we're talking a family, a church, or a society, any entity where one person has a massive amount of power, watch out. Watch out. Okay? There's a famous phrase that was uttered by a British politician last century. The British politician made this observation: power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. I like that. Power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. It's a clever phrase. It's insightful. So power is not evil, but the misuse of power is. And that means either if I hoard power, that's dangerous. But the flip side is I could be someone who's quietly saying to myself, I don't want to be responsible for my life or my happiness. So I'm going to endue you with all this power. You're the pastor of my church. If things go well, I will bless your name. And if they don't, you're going to be the first person I'm going to be blaming. That's a dangerous place to be. And not a healthy way to relate. So pastoral ethics, as with ethics in any other, there's medical ethics, right? There's political ethics, lots of ethics. Pastoral ethics, in some ways, are just general human ethics, that there are healthy ways to deal with people. And I think a very, very natural place that is both biblical but also generous, the first two of these, and to some degree is that as well, is to say to yourself, okay, let's look at myself. Do I want to be treated the way I'm treating people? And if I want to keep my certain patterns, that's good. And if I want to change, that's a good habit of self-reflection, is to change something about the way I go about doing whatever I'm doing. So ethics, as all of you said, you gave some nice association. Ethics involves behavior. Ethics involves standards, right? Ethics involves relationships. Hopefully, there's something inherent in ethics that says this is just a healthy way to live. And it promotes life. And it doesn't guarantee happiness, but it's going to tend to promote it. Right? No one can guarantee happiness or success, but it tends to lead to these things. I've been helped by remembering, and I said this the other day, I'm going to say it again. I've been helped by remembering that even people who we all want to follow had failures in their life, and I'm starting with Jesus, okay? Because I know Jesus did everything right, the way God wants His Son to do these things, all right? But there were people and there were places and there were times where Jesus did the right thing, but the result was not a healthy one, right? So the feeding of the 5,000, as we noted the other day, within 24 hours, people were calling him basically a son of the devil. 24 hours. 3 meals a day, you're the son of the devil tomorrow. Wow, that was fast. That's one of the fastest, broadest failures of in history. That was Jesus. I know he did it right. I don't question that. Paul, very clearly in Paul's letters, again, as we noted the other day, Paul's letters all show struggles within churches, and a lot of the struggles are targeting Paul. You realize this? You know, we all take, you take for granted, Paul was God's, an apostle in God's circle. We don't question, was Paul doing the right or the wrong thing? We know he was a blessed, ordained apostle, worker, evangelist. Okay? But there were people in various churches who questioned that. People in Corinth questioned that. People in Thessalonica questioned that. People in Galatia questioned that. Okay? And other places as well. So even God's anointed workers will receive opposition, even when they're in the middle of doing right things. Now, if we make a mistake, it is appropriate for someone to say, brother or sister, I think you need to consider redoing something different. Fair enough. Fair enough. And so forth. So we are faulty human beings, blessed by God. Ethics helps us say we still have guidelines. And you know what I'm going to observe? For all the sad stories we can tell about pastoral failures, there's plenty out there. Let's pause and acknowledge the good news, okay? There's an awful lot of good being done by God's people. And the New Testament says to us, God will not forget your service of love. He will not forget it. So there's acknowledgement of that as well. He will not let your work fall flat. There are times when, in the plan of God, things are not going to succeed. Okay? But, please, don't forget, there are so many places where your plans do succeed, and God is pleased to multiply them and make them big. Okay? I served in 2 small churches in my earlier years, and gradually both of them grew, and both of them have vibrant ministries to this day. Okay? I served in a larger church, actually one of the largest churches in the affiliation that I was in for a number of years. Things went well. I was hoping we would expand in certain ways. We stayed large, but we didn't get huge. But it was in the following years that they did expand their ministries in ways I was hoping for, didn't see, and they've actually been spawning new churches as well. It just, for God's plan, it wasn't for my time there, but it came shortly afterwards, okay? And so those things happen, and one of the stories I can tell you positively is I know a number of cases, not many, but a few cases, where a church decided to close not because they were having struggles. I know of churches, a couple of churches. One of my good friends who was a pastor in Boston had a successful church, financially going well, reaching people, doing a wonderful ministry, fairly close to Harvard University, as we were talking about Harvard the other day, the other moment I should say. And their church decided that they actually could do more good if their church disbanded and closed, and they went to other places and poured their efforts into a variety of different church ministries. And that's exactly what they did. They first fixed their building up very, very nicely and sold it at a cheap price to an incoming immigrant church, which didn't have a lot of money. So they underpriced their church building so this immigrant group could get a nice church building. They then took the parsonage and they sold it to the pastor at a cheap price, okay? So he gets this very valuable building in a beautiful part of the city, but way under its value. They gave it to us. Then they took what money they had left and they gave it to charities. This is what I call closing with grace and finesse. Okay? They made it not a time of mourning, but a time of great productivity and generosity. They felt they had just reached this point where the ministry that they had, they'd done what they needed to do. It was time to change. That's to their credit. So churches, it's been said, churches have a natural life cycle, right? A natural, and for some of them, the cycle may be centuries long, right? But most churches, most local congregations, whether they are around for a few years or for many, many hundreds of years, the times arise and the times change and fall, and this is just the way societies used to be. By the way, real simple example of this historically, not quite your home, but close to home. You realize that North Africa in the 1st and 2nd and 3rd and 4th centuries was one of the most vibrant places of the Christian church for centuries. Just across North Africa, one of the most burgeoning, fast-growing church communities of the world at that time. Now, history changed, politics changed, violence changed things. It did not last. Today there are Christians all through North Africa, but it's not the center of Christianity that it once was, okay? Part of God's plan, I don't know that I understand it, I just say it rose and it went down, and it's still there, believers are there, but He's got other plans. So the same goes for our church, and our ethics need to have not only a rootedness in the Bible, and a rootedness in what I would just say common sense, what we sometimes call natural ethics, okay, as well as considering with some of these other aspects, but also have a flexibility that says sometimes the challenges of a particular community, they just haven't been faced before. Technology is doing that to us. We need a vibrant that helps us to meet those challenges. I think my battery may be cutting out here. I can't tell. I'm just checking if that's what's going on or not, because the sound keeps coming in and going out. Just bear with me 1 minute, if you would, please. Well, it seems to be charged up. I don't know. It seems to be okay, so for whatever reason. So, anyway, let me pause. What kind of thoughts do you have in this? I'm going to, in a minute, talk about boundaries, but I still want to just generally think big picture. Hopefully, if you're someone attracted to a position which allows you access to people, ethics is important to you. Everybody has an ethic of some kind. Question is the good one or is the bad one? A lot of my students who I have, especially ones I teach online, are nursing students. They have to take a variety of courses. By the way, my middle son is also a nurse, okay? Nurses have access to medicines, right? They have access to people much more extensively than the doctors do. The doctors are in briefly. The nurses are with these people day in, day out. So if a nurse wants to steal drugs from their patients, a great place to steal drugs, turn around and sell them, make money. Nurses do that sometimes. Nursing ethics is important. Nurses sometimes are very respectful of people who are weak, but not always. Nursing ethics is a big thing. You have access to people of all ages, right? Of all ages. And of all situations. Some are wealthier, some are poorer. Some are happy, some are broken. Yeah, well, you deal with vulnerable individuals. So any thoughts on this? On the line? Am I making sense here? I'm sure you have thought ethics. I don't know whether you think of it this way or not. Any thoughts before I go to boundaries? Okay, so let's take one aspect now of ethics. Boundaries, we all know what a boundary is, right? A boundary is a line around something, whether it's a literal line or not. There's a boundary just outside this window made of, it looks like to me like stone and concrete. You know, this property versus that property. Above it is another kind of boundary. I see what I'm pretty sure are electric lines above there. That's what's an obvious kind of boundary. All right. There are boundaries of privacy. Notice, no surprise, everybody in this room is wearing clothes. Thank you. They say, you can see my face, you can see my hands, arms, legs, whatever, but there's an aspect of me that is private to me or to my immediate people at home. Right? That's a boundary. You can see certain things, you can interact with certain things, but then there are places you should not go. Boundaries are not identical between societies. All right? I will tell you something that I both appreciate, but I'm also a bit saddened about American society. Good news is American society is often saying it's very important that you respect a person's body and privacy. It doesn't always work, but the principle is a good one. In order for me to be a college teacher, I have to go through various security checks every couple of years. There's 3 basic security checks. I have to be fingerprinted and have my fingerprints on record with the FBI. They are on record. Okay? I have to get a couple of different kinds of state and local security checks because occasionally my students are under the age of 18. And part of the legal strictures of the U.S. is now not only do teachers have to do this, but in our churches, if anyone in the church is, for example, a teacher of youths, they also have to go through security checks. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, but I'm just saying that's the principle. So what's this saying? Well, the message, it's an imperfect message, but the message is there is a human dignity that respects people's private zone. Well, we're public in many ways, but we're private. We have a public self, we have a private self. And this is a boundary distinction, okay? And figuring out the right kind of boundaries, the bad news of all, I'll give you the good news first, I'm the U.S. The bad news is now there are various laws where I have to be very, very careful how I even physically touch a student. All right? And I use this example, I talk about you folks all the time, just so you know this when I go home. I say when I go to Africa, sometimes if I'm talking with a man, the man will take my hand and we'll walk along hand in hand and we'll talk. And that's the way it is. And I said, but I know I don't even attempt to do that with you in America. That's a lawsuit. Okay? And I get arrested. Now, it doesn't mean I did anything bad, but the law says you should not have touched that student, male or female, in any way, shape, or form. I have to be very, very careful about even where I put my hands on someone. I don't regularly do this. I'm just saying, if I even happen to touch someone, there's various guidelines, if you will, that say to me as a teacher, be careful, especially when dealing with someone younger than yourself. At this point, I'm older than most of the people I interact with. Okay, that's an easy kind of formula. All right, these are boundaries. So the question, of course, is what are good, healthy, pastoral boundaries? And there's no single set of rules, like here's the list. It's not quite that simple. But we do want to start to acknowledge that there are ways in which we should recognize, I'm going to erase part of this and leave the other part up. There are ways in which we ought to be saying, okay, let's at least be very intentional about what we're doing. I'm going to put some guidelines. These are guidelines and they're zones, but they're not laws. I'm not getting into the legal stuff. I'm talking about general kinds of zones, if you will, to consider areas of boundaries. And since we're talking physical, I'm going to start with that. I'm just going to say physical because the physical not only has to do with safety, but it also has to do with sexuality. So, and the two are connected in some ways. Safety and sexuality. Okay? Again, with care, when I'm talking with a young man, a young male, especially if he is an athletic male, I'm allowed to do certain things, all right? I had a student who a few years ago, it was a very interesting, very unusual interchange. I had him as a freshman, okay? And I was watching the students take a test in class. And I'm looking at him, I think he's looking at other people's papers, right? And so I don't remember if I talked to him or if I just gave him a dirty look or something. And I gave him a dirty look is what it was, as if to say, make sure you don't look at the papers. So you know what he started doing in that test? He started stretching his neck, you know, to look at all these places like this. And I thought, you idiot. I didn't say it, I thought it, okay? And I failed him on the exam. And I told him why. I said, you cheated on the exam. Failure. And it was very interesting. He came to me a couple of days later. We got his exam back with the F. And he said, Dr. Watt, and I said, I need to talk to you about something. I said, okay. He said, first off, when I'm really thinking, my eyes wander, okay? And he said, I was not cheating on the exam. And he said, I was not. I said, I believe you. He seemed to be telling the truth. He said, I was not. I said, good. And then he said, when I saw you giving me that dirty look, he said, I just decided to bait you and make you angry. Okay? So he said, I faked looking at all these exams. He said, I give you my word, I really did not cheat. And you know what, the fact that he said, what I did was wrong. He said, I should have been careful at the beginning not to give the appearance I was cheating, and I definitely was wrong when I tried to bait you and get you angry. He says, I give you my word, I was not cheating. Now, by the way, do you know what that young man has gone on to become? He's a lawyer today. He graduated from college, excellent student, okay, in a really hard area to major, and he went to law school. He's a lawyer now, okay. But it was a wonderful kind of lawyer. So he was also a football player, big built guy. And as he got close to graduation, I don't regularly do this, believe me, but as he got close to graduation, he was so happy about graduation, big hulking guy, and I decided I was going to body check him just for fun. So as we walked toward each other, and I just, without warning, I jumped up in the air, and I body checked him, chest to chest. Of course, I fell down. And it was a wonderful moment. I don't do that with young women. Okay? Not appropriate. I don't do that with young men. But that one occasionally, I forget something. Okay? I have an occasion, just one more example. It's very interesting. I didn't do this, she did, but she didn't do anything wrong. There was a young woman who was deeply involved with satanic stuff. We occasionally have students involved with evil and satanic stuff. And she was freed out of it and lived a much freer life. It was wonderful to see the changes that eventually took place. And one day she's coming down the hall and she sees me and she's just so happy to be a free and happy woman. She was a short woman. She jumps in the air and just grabs a hold of me at my shoulders and just kind of hangs there, giving me this hug. And a couple of the professors and administrators were around. And they kind of gave me this look like, what are you doing? I didn't do anything. I didn't do anything wrong. She didn't do anything wrong. But I'm saying these are the exceptions. I don't regularly do these things. I'm very cautious about how. I don't mind touching a person's shoulder, especially when I'm in Africa. You know, this is normal to African culture. This is normal, okay? But we just need to be aware. We've got to figure out what's appropriate for both general safety things. Make it clear we are respecting a person's individual privacy and dignity. Are we good so far? I'm not giving rules, I'm giving guidelines. That's all. Number two, I want to talk about money. Specifically as a pastor. There is only, I can say this in all honesty, there is only one time in my life, one short season in my life, where I have ever touched the church's money. Okay, and it was at the church's request. A young girl in our church was involved in a fire and horrifically burned. She survived. She survived, but it was horrific. It was horrible, horrible, hideous what happened to her. Thank God she survived with surgeries, went on to live a very healthy life, thank God. Anyway, in those early months, her family was devastated. They were poor. She had medical bills that went through the roof. And all these people in the neighborhood wanted to give money to help. So our church created a fund. And because I was the best known, I was the pastor of the church, it was natural people would give me the money. Except for that. Then I turned it over to the church treasurer, and she created the fund, and that was that. So, except for that, I never, ever, ever have touched even a penny of the church's money. And it's for this reason. I don't want to steal their money. I really don't. It's not a temptation for me. It is not a temptation. But I'm making it clear to other people, I'm not a pastor to get your money. I want to be paid. I do. I want to be paid. And I want my pastoral expenses to be covered. That's right. That's healthy. Right? Paul, say you know the principle, Paul says you do not muzzle the mouth of the ox while he's grinding the grain. Paul says elsewhere in 1 Corinthians, okay, the pastoral workers of various kinds should be cared for by their churches. He says it. He says it. There's nothing wrong with being paid. Some people make a lot, some people make less, but the principle is you get paid. But then in return, I want to make people very, very clear, I am not here to take your money. Not one penny of it. Don't give me money. Don't. Just don't. And furthermore, just to show you yet another boundary we routinely now put in our churches, when the people, whatever you want to call them, the church workers who collect the monies together, okay, when they do that, or count whatever gifts have been given that day, it's done in two people. A pair of people do it, and they're not to be husband and wife, not to be brother, sister, not to be, father, child, something like that. It's two unrelated people. Count the money together, log the money together, report it, and give the receipt when they deposit it at the bank. Okay? And I can say thankfully, in all my years directly, the churches we have never had any theft. We're pretty sure we've never had any theft. But I know of a number of heartbreaking situations in the U.S. and in the mission fields in which I served for 30-some years on my church's mission board. I was the director of my church's mission board for many years. Okay, and in some of our mission efforts, there were cases where there was some significant theft. But anyway, that's a boundary I draw. Okay? That's a boundary I draw. I'm going to add a couple more, and I'm going to invite you to contribute some in just a moment, okay? Another boundary I draw is where and how I meet with people. Where and how I meet with people. Again, I'm giving some principles. I'm not giving rules or laws. But the principles are important. There are people where I can say to them, come over to my house and we'll chat. No problem. There are people where I can say, let's go out for coffee, let's go out for a meal if we need to. I don't regularly do it, occasionally do it. Go out for a meal. I'm in public, that's a good thing. There are certain people where I'm extra careful whether it's for somebody else's benefit or for my benefit. There are some people I do not feel safe around. They're not a large number, but I do not feel safe. Male or female, I just don't feel safe around them. So I'm not going to be in an isolated place where I think I might be at risk. Okay? Furthermore, if I am meeting with somebody else's wife or daughter or mother, I may choose a very public place to meet. If it's in my office, quite possibly, my office door is partly open. Some offices have little windows. That's good. My office doesn't, okay? But I can meet with the door slightly open, okay? That way if somebody wants to just come and go out, they're free to do so. We still have a degree of privacy to talk about whatever we need to talk about, all right? But I'm very careful about how I do that. Because it's not only am I protecting the person, and I'm protecting myself, and I'm protecting myself sometimes from myself, right? I'm pushing back on a temptation there, right? And even if I don't think it's big, it's still there because I'm human and I sin. But I'm also protecting the people who watch, all right? And occasionally some people watch because they're concerned, and occasionally some people watch because they are judgmental, and they're looking to find fault with you. Got to be careful of those kind of people. Be careful of all this, okay? So where and how I meet with people is pretty important. I'm going to give you one more boundary, and I'm going to invite you to contribute some, okay? And I've hinted at this boundary a couple times this week, but I haven't labeled it a boundary, even if it's what it is. And it has to do with what I'm just going to simply call subject matter. Okay? Subject matter. Now let me start with some of the most sensitive, but I'm going to extend it a little bit. Not often, but at times, And it's generally been a younger woman, just in my experience, it's generally been a younger woman, but occasionally it's an older woman, will want to talk about something to do with being feminine and or something about feminine sexuality. Okay? Now, I want to be careful because I don't want to be afraid of the subject. I don't want to give an appearance like, oh, I'm too scared, this is too sensitive a matter. That's not me. All right? And I want to be careful not to do that. Occasionally, it's interesting. I've said to, in this case, I'm thinking that my stories happen to be involved generally young adult women. I say to them, why do you want to talk about something so personal with an older man? Interesting what they've said. Women, consider this. Some of these younger women have said, I want to talk about these things with you because you understand you're a man. They say of themselves, I don't trust other women. They're too judgmental. I thought that was interesting. Are they right or wrong? I don't know. You can decide that. But anyway, I'm willing to talk about these things if they're very, very personal, sexually related, to a degree. But depending on where they want to go with it, then I say, let me refer you to somebody else. Okay? And usually that somebody else is a woman. That's one kind of subject matter. Again, I'm not scared of it, but I just want to be extra protective of them as well as of me without running away from it. Another example of subject matter. Finances are a practical issue. Nearly everybody has to make decisions on how do I handle what resources do I have. I'm willing to talk some general principles because it's something I'm good at. I handle money my own money carefully. I do. I always have. I think I've gotten better at it over the years, even beyond where I was before. I grew up in a household that had enough, but barely enough. We didn't suffer because of deprivation, but we came awful close in a number of my growing up years. Things were pretty tight. And I've learned to be careful about how to handle money. Now, sometimes I talk about ideas about handling your resources with people. I can do that. But if someone wants a thorough program on how do I plan for the future, I say to them, I'll give you a couple books, or let me refer you to a friend of mine who is a financial advisory expert. Let them talk into your life. They're also trained and licensed to do so. So that's just one example of subject matter, okay, where I draw boundaries, what I'm willing to talk about. Sometimes because they're very personal, or sometimes because other people are experts. And I gave this example earlier today, as well as yesterday, when people are needing specialty counseling, for example, on trauma therapy. I'm willing to open the subject a little bit with them, but I'm pretty quick to refer them to someone who is an expert in that. We've already talked about that, so that's a kind of a boundary as well, with me saying, here are my limits. Let me ask you, what other areas haven't we listed here where you've had to draw some kind of a boundary? What other come to mind? By the way, I've already got one more that came to my mind, but I'll see if somebody else mentions it first. Other areas where you've had to draw some lines to say in a healthy way, I'm going to be on this side of the line and you can be on that side of the line. What are some of the other healthy boundaries? Anyone? Please, you have a microphone? Good, please.
Mine is a question.
Okay.
As a pastor, we need to come to the issue of hospitality.
Yes.
Which is serving a pastor. Who is supposed to serve the pastor?
That's a big one. Thank you. I've changed in some of my opinions on that very subject. I have. Question about hospitality. Because hospitality, listen, here's the difference between hospitality and entertainment. Hospitality is being friendly and welcoming, right? It's designed to say to somebody else, you're welcome into my zone, or if you're a family person, our zone. And Christians are encouraged to be hospitable as a general principle. Okay? Obviously, otherwise you would not have asked the question. You know that's a Christian value, is hospitality. However, okay, The difference between that and entertainment's a good thing. Entertainment's designed to impress and excite someone. There's a place for entertainment, but that's not what Christians are expected to give. We're expected to be hospitable, whether it's into our home or at least into the realm in which we live. Maybe it's our office. That's not a place to be hospitable. Now, are you asking about boundaries on hospitality? Because I'd like to talk about that for a moment. Or is there something more general about hospitality?
Is the wife supposed to serve the pastor or will be some lady selected in the church?
Like how much expectation on the wife? Is that what you're asking? Yeah, it's a great question. I would say cautiously, home hospitality has to be done as a team, okay? And if you're doing something where you want to be able to say to anybody, yes, we'll meet, maybe the home is not the place to show the hospitality if it's going to cause problems, I'm going to add, for the wife or for the children. So hospitality can be done at home. I have a friend who, as his family was young and it was kind of a noisy, rowdy family, he loved to host people for meals, but he and his wife had an agreement. If he was going to host someone for a meal, some of the time they would go out for the dinner. He would show hospitality by buying dinner for the person he's hosting. He's still being hospitable, but doing it outside the home. If he's going to do it inside the home, he and his wife, I do it from man's point of view since I'm a male. If it's the woman pastor, let's bring in the husband here. But the pastor has to agree with the spouse, this is something we can do together. If we're not going to do it together, we probably shouldn't be doing it in the home. I need to do it elsewhere. Or, we do a variation on this. I'm sure you realize that sometimes you welcome people generously into your home and they abuse you. And I've had this experience where we welcomed people into our home, and then what they did is they turned around and they used the experience in our home to criticize me. Not many people do that, but a few have. All right? And so if I'm aware someone is like that, I put a boundary and I will not host them in my home. They're not welcome there, nor should they be. Are there other aspects of hospitality you want to open up? Or does that kind of get at what you're thinking?
We have talked about there at home. What about the church? The church.
Yeah.
Yes.
Do you mean, does the church support the pastor in his hospitality or her hospitality?
Maybe after sermon you want to be refreshed. Who is supposed to serve you there? Is it? Because sometimes maybe they are.
I'm going to add, so I get the big picture. This is something a number of you are relating to automatically, and I want to be clear. This gentleman here is going to see if we clarify this.
I think what he's asking is, as a pastor, he has served in the church. It is time for refreshment.
Mm-hmm.
Is it his wife who is supposed to serve him or church members? In the church.
When you say to serve him, could you be more
Something
specific?
food or refreshments
Okay.
in the church after the service.
After the skull, I got you. Oh boy, I'd love to bring the church in on that one. And not. Now I see why you're going. Yeah, I can see why you're questioning. Oh, go ahead, please. She has that look on her face. Be careful.
So, you all know what I'm going to say, I think, but I'm going to ask the question, okay? So, I said earlier this week that hospitality is one of my spiritual gifts, okay? Now, one of the things that I think happens, okay, is that if it's not our spiritual gift, we overlook it. And we dismiss how much time it takes to host, to prepare, to cook, to plan, to shop. Okay? Ladies, are you with me on this one? Okay. That time, that effort is, God bless you, is sometimes dismissed. Ah, she'll take care of that. Ah, she'll do that. Okay? I love hosting. Love hosting. Okay? But if we host, okay, there's going to be a team effort in hosting. Okay? I need you to get me this. I need you to help me clean this, and this. Let me be very clear on something that might be a cultural difference that you might not be aware of. Labor is very expensive in the United States. If somebody cleans my house, it's me. If somebody cooks a meal, it's me. If somebody does the grocery shopping, it's me. Okay. So those things take time. There's not extra help. Okay? So I told you that I bring donuts to my church every week. Okay? If I have time, I will make something, but I don't always have time. Okay? After I've done all that work of hosting and preparing, because it's a team effort, the ladies or the guys at the church will often say, you made all this, you go first. Not because I'm the pastor, not because I'm on this pedestal, but because I was the one who hosted. Okay? So when we think about who serves whom, okay, are we serving the person who did the preparation? Are we serving the person who put all the work in? They're serving. Are we serving them back? Okay? So, would I get Jonathan a plate? Absolutely I would. Would he get me a plate? Absolutely he would. Okay. Would I do the dishes if he cooked? Absolutely I would. Would he do the dishes if I cooked? Absolutely he would. Because we're a team and we serve each other. We serve each other. We respect each other. Okay. So, you're grown. You can make your own plate. You're not a child, right? Okay. But my challenge to you is, because I don't have an answer, because I'm not in your culture. Okay. I really don't have an answer, but my challenge is, are we serving the people who serve us? Are we taking care of those people who provide hospitality for us? Okay. And that's maybe the real question. Maybe. Maybe.
We take one comment back then. We're almost out of time, but would you like to just send the
Yes.
podcast to her? Oh.
I didn't know where
Oh, actually, she's going there. Never mind, she's going. Okay.
I just wanted to clarify on that aspect.
Yes.
And you have rightly put it, it's more of culture.
Yes.
Because in the Kenyan churches or African context, the man of God is normally served tea or snacks after service, after ministering. And I think that is where the question was coming from.
Okay.
Like after he's finished serving, he's back to his office, who serves him? And you'll find in most churches you have the hospitality department that makes sure the pastor is served, he has taken a cup of tea or whatever snacks have been prepared. Or if you have guest speakers or guest ministers who've come to the church, there's always something set aside for them. Yeah? So the question was, that's what he was asking. Who serves the pastor? Is it the wife or the hospitality team that comes to serve him after service? Because there's something that has been set aside for him after service.
So, and if you have a hospitality team, okay, then let the team do their job. Okay? Now, unless one of those team members is trying to get in good with the pastor, and the wife doesn't like that. Okay? You laugh because you know it's true. Okay? And that's where boundaries come in. Yes? Okay? So, but we still need to make sure that that hospitality team is served as well. Okay? Or if it's the wife, that she feels safe. Okay? That wife shouldn't feel threatened by the hospitality team. Her place as your wife should be secure. Okay? So that those boundaries should be in place. Okay? But we all should be serving. We all should be serving. And if you want to learn more about service leadership, we're doing a leadership seminar at Pastor Raphael's church, and the times have been changed slightly. So we are doing it starting tomorrow evening from 6 to 8, if you can find transportation over there. Friday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. So in the evening, and we will be starting out with what it means to have biblical leadership, and we will be getting into biblical leadership as service, and using Jesus as a model for that bit of biblical leadership. Okay? So, thank you for clarifying the question. Okay? If you have a team in place, use the team. Make sure the boundaries are in place so the wife doesn't feel unsafe. Okay? And make sure your team is being served as well as them serving.
Amen. Thank you. Let's go.
I would not be very much concerned on the wife. She should not deal with her safety or being unsafe at that level.
Maybe.
The concern would be maybe the safety of the pastor. Sometimes we have cases where pastors have been poisoned by the members. So I would link that with if there is something to be taken in the church, how would we ensure the safety of the servant of God?
Wow.
Because if it is the issue of infidelity, it should be dealt with outside, far away from means. But the issue of safety of the servant of God, if he is served with poison or poisoned food, how?
Practical issue. I have to think about that, Phil. I don't want to give a quick answer. I'm not sure. In America, we don't use poison. We use guns.
True. But it might explain. The last time I was here, I had food poisoning, and it took 2 rounds of antibiotics to clear me up. You could have just found out that somebody might have tried to poison me.
No, we don't do that. Just kidding. But it's interesting. I have to think about this question seriously. I just haven't thought about that dynamic.
Actually, it has never happened in some places.
It does.
Wow.
Yeah.
I'd want a new congregation.
So maybe I just boundaries.
Yeah.
Maybe one of the boundaries is the time frames of calling or talking.
That was what I was going to add, dealing with time. We're out of time today to talk, and I want to respect the boundary. But yeah, that was the other area that I didn't put on the board, and I was thinking I should have. Maybe tomorrow we can have some time.